From the very moment Aria Whitmore stepped onto the deck of the Celestia Monarch, the $210 million masterpiece gleaming under the afternoon sun, she was ruthlessly stripped of her dignity. A cloud-like white linen dress floated around her legs. Her hair was loosely tied with a rough piece of hemp, still carrying the briny scent of the ocean breeze. No diamonds glittered on her wrists or ears, only a simple, earthy beauty, like a fragile paper sail adrift in a sea of Versace fabrics. Soft laughter drifted from a cluster of guests draped in silk and gold. A man, twirling an empty champagne flute between his fingers, smirked and tossed a cruel remark her way. Did the server take a wrong turn? The empty champagne glass, a hollow, lifeless object, was handed into her grasp. As if to deny her very right to exist aboard this luxurious vessel, another woman's voice chimed in, sharp as steel sheathed in velvet. This is a christening ceremony for the elite, not a coastal flea market. In that moment, amid a golden ocean of diamond-studded guests, Aria Whitmore, dressed in nothing but humble linen and unshakable pride, stood silent, facing the tidal wave of disdain that was about to crash over her. Isola Ventura, the private island tucked away in the deep blue embrace of the Ligurian Sea, shimmered like a hidden gem under the sun. Jagged cliffs jutted out into the surf, and ancient gray stone villas clung to the hillsides like swallows returning to their nests. At the very heart of the island, the Celestia Monarch, the $210 million marvel, lay anchored, ready for the most anticipated christening ceremony of the year. That afternoon, sunlight spilled golden honey across the marina. The air was thick with the mingling scents of salt water, freshly polished teakwood, and the delicate clink of crystal glasses. It was a world custom made for those who could buy nations with a flick of their pen. Aria Whitmore stood at the beginning of the velvet-draped gangway, her worn leather shoes making no sound as she took her first step. Her white linen dress danced with the breeze, as if she were not so much wearing it as cloaking herself in the very waters of the sea. Her hair was tied off center with a coarse marine rope, a few sun-streaked chestnut strands caught by the ocean wind, framing her sun-kissed face. No glitter adorned her neck or wrists. Only her gaze, deep and fathomless like the trenches at the ocean's floor, followed her steady approach to the yacht. "Steady now, Aria," she whispered to herself, her hand brushing against the coarse sea rope necklace at her throat. "Just walk through them. Just breathe. It's no different than crossing rough waters." The air shifted the moment she set foot on the main deck. Heads turned, no, scrutinized every inch of her presence. From a corner of the deck, Isabella Moreau, heiress to the Moreau financial empire, narrowed her eyes behind her gold-rimmed Cartier sunglasses. She raised an eyebrow, swirling her champagne, as if inspecting a flawed artifact. Omar El-Saleh, the indolent prince lounging in a silk shirt and a gleaming Richard Mille watch, sank deeper into a teak lounge chair, chuckling dryly. Beside him, whispers spread like a virus. "Who let the help up here? Lost from the engine room. This is a yacht christening, not a backwater craft fair." Aria heard every word. They cut through her like knives, but she did not bow her head. She tightened her grip, her eyes sweeping the vast teak deck like a sailor reading the tides before a storm. "They only see the surface. I know my worth isn't stitched into my dress or dangled from my wrists. The sea never asked if you wore Versace. It only asked, are you strong enough?" Hidden behind marble railings at a distance, Aria's mother, Margot Whitmore, watched everything unfold via a private live stream, her trembling hand clutching an old seashell pendant. Her eyes, heavy with pride and worry, wavered between pain and hope. The yacht shimmered under the sunset. Valentino gowns swept the deck, bespoke Zegna suits gleamed, and heavy Cartier diamonds weighed down slender wrists, all glittering under the sun, bound together by one thing, a chilling emptiness. And Aria stood out amid this sea of polished grandeur, like a lone wooden boat drifting across a golden ocean of glittering yachts. A group of wealthy Gulf matrons, robed in silk dresses embroidered with pearls worth more than penthouses, floated past her. One of them, crowned with a sapphire tiara, threw Aria a look of such disdain that even the air seemed to falter. "Who invited?" That? She sneered. Probably a lost deckhand. The words pierced sharp and merciless, like tiny knives. Arya smiled faintly. Not because she was immune to the pain, but because she understood. If the sea taught me anything, it's that the fiercest winds always come just before the tides turn. She drew a deep breath. The salt air filled her lungs, harsh, biting, but invigorating. At that very moment, the golden speaker horn mounted above the deck crackled to life. A warm, deep, male voice rolled across the marina. Ladies and gentlemen, please make your way to the bow. The christening ceremony of the Celestia monarch is about to begin. The crowd shifted like a tide of diamonds and silk, and amid them, a girl in a simple white linen dress walked forward, as calm and quiet as a sleeping ocean, awaiting the storm she knew would one day come. The clicking of high heels echoed lightly across the teak deck, like the distant drumming of an approaching hunt. Piercing stares followed Arya's every step, sharp as drawn arrows, waiting to strike. From the marble steps leading to the bow, Isabella Moreau approached, her silver Versace gown clinging to her like a second, razor-sharp skin, luxurious, flawless, deadly. Isabella smiled sweetly, her voice floating out like honey steeped in vinegar, loud enough for all to hear. "Oh," she said, her tone dripping with mock surprise. "Someone seems to have wandered over from the engine room." Laughter erupted across the deck, stifled, hissing, like wind slashing. Throth rigging. Arya paused for just a heartbeat, letting the cold wave of mockery wash over her, but she did not answer. Instead, she simply drew in another breath, as if inhaling the coming storm into her chest. Farther back, Omar al-Saleh, draped in his white silk suit, sprawled deeper into his teak chair, idly toying with his gleaming Richard Mille watch. He chuckled, not even bothering to hide his disdain. "That dress looks like it was cut from leftover sales. Maybe she mistook the Celestia monarch for a market stall in Amalfi." The crowd snickered. A group of young women, dripping in pearls and white gold, discreetly pulled out their phones, snapping zoomed-in photos of Arya's worn leather shoes. On their screens, captions began to form. Hashtag Marina Mistake, hashtag Who Invited Her, hashtag Sail Rag Style. Keep laughing, Arya thought, her fingers tightening slightly around the rough sea rope at her neck. Like a talisman, the biggest wave always comes last. At the edge of the deck, Serena Fontaine, Parisian fashion queen and couture icon, leaned casually against the marble balustrade, her $55,000 gown flowing like a silver stream around her. She squinted, inspecting Arya as one might scrutinize a defective piece of merchandise. "Absolutely. Disgraceful," Serena hissed. Right in the middle of the Whitmore ceremony, a stain. Each word was a cold blade slicing the air. Arya heard it all, felt it, each syllable like a needle pricking her skin. But instead of breaking, she straightened further, like a lone cliff, standing defiantly against crashing waves. Behind the scenes, Margot Whitmore still watched through the hidden live stream, her thin fingers clutching the shell pendant so tightly her knuckles turned white. She whispered softly, as if in prayer, "Don't bow, Arya. They may own the world, but they will never touch your heart." A sea breeze swept across the deck. Arya's white linen dress fluttered like a free gull teasing the waves, luminous against the diamond-studded crowd. But the glittering masses saw none of that beauty. They saw only difference, and in their world, the difference was unforgivable. A young server in a crisp white livery passed by Arya, carrying a tray of champagne. With clumsy deliberateness, he let an empty glass tumble, shattering at her feet. The crack of glass striking wood sounded like a stray gunshot. Arya looked down at the broken shards, then up again, catching a fleeting, apologetic glance, followed immediately by smirks from the nearby onlookers. "Keep going, Arya. Don't let them steal your silence. Don't let them reach your soul." She moved forward, not hesitantly, but with a quiet, steady rhythm, like the soft surge of tide over stone. And somewhere deep inside her, a wave began to gather, silent, invisible, yet unstoppable. A wave that, when it rose, would force the entire ocean to kneel. The sunlight on the deck of the Celestia monarch turned molten, pouring across the lavish gathering like the last gilded veil of their arrogance. The contempt was no longer hidden. It spilled across the deck like a rising tide, swallowing every inch of space Arya passed through. A woman in a flowing Valentino silk gown, a champagne flute in hand, brushed past her, deliberately flicking a few drops onto Arya's linen dress. She whispered loudly enough for her entire circle to hear, "Careful. Dirty water might ruin your Versace." Soft laughter rippled behind her, like the delicate shatter of glass underfoot. At the lounge on the upper deck, Isabella Moreau, triumphant, orchestrated her next little entertainment. Holding up her phone, pretending to take scenic shots, she zoomed in mercilessly on Arya. On her screen, biting captions formed, #LostStaff, #WrongDoc, #Celestia Clown. Omar Al-Sail lounged with one leg thrown casually over a teak coffee table, chuckling loudly as he peered at Isabella's phone. "If this is a party for the elite," he drawled, "she must be from the dockside cleaning crew." Another snicker rose from a cluster of privileged heirs. "Right? That dress wouldn't even make a decent tablecloth at the Amalfi Market." Arya kept walking, but every step felt like moving through an invisible acid rainstorm. The sea breeze whistled past the masts, carrying whispers sharp as fishbone spines, slicing into her skin. Somebody must have mixed up the invitations. "Huh? Look at those shoes. Black market leather." Among millions in jewelry, she's just a stain, a server. This one, grinning smugly, passed by carrying a tray full of champagne. He stumbled, not by accident, bumping lightly into Arya. A cold wave of champagne spilled over her arm, icy and humiliating. No apology came. Instead, from a nearby group, a shrill female voice rang out, "Well, at least she can mop the deck with her dress." Laughter cracked like fireworks behind her. Phones snapped photos and videos in secret, angles skewed and cruel. Arya knew these images wouldn't be posted to celebrate her. "They mock me," Arya thought quietly, dabbing at her soaked arm with a corner of her own dress. "They forget that the sea, too, was once mocked, until its waves roared." The crowd thickened around her, like a forest of barbed thorns. A line of socialites, draped in Oscar de la Renta gowns, heavy pearls straining against their necks, deliberately formed a human wall in front of her. One woman, wielding a Chanel folding fan like a weapon, pointed straight at Arya. "Technical cruise that way." "Little girl." The laughter surged, chaotic, vicious, like a crashing tide. From somewhere behind, a male guest added, "What are you waiting for? Escort her back to the maintenance bay. This is a playground for royalty, not a charity ward." Arya stopped. For one heartbeat, the world froze. The sea held its breath. Every gaze snapped onto her, waiting for a tear, a flinch, a retreat. But Arya simply lifted her head. Her eyes, deep chestnut, once used to reading the underwater maps of Mariana's depths, were now cold, unshakable abysses. "I wasn't born to conquer their marinas," she thought. "I was born to walk straight through them." She moved forward, slow, deliberate, shoulders square, chin held high, like a lone vessel slicing through stormy seas. Unafraid of the fiercest waves, the crowd faltered. Laughter stumbled awkwardly into silence. Phones, once sneaking gleeful shots, lowered sheepishly, because there was something about Arya, defiance that could not be bent, that made their mockery seem suddenly cheap, brittle. Far away, behind her private screen, Margot Whitmore wept, not out of sorrow, but out of pride, and above the Ligurian Sea, gulls circled silently, bearing witness. They understood. A mighty storm was forming quietly beneath the surface, and when it rose, no one aboard the Celestia Monarch would be able to stand against it. In a small, hidden room behind the harbor, where only the sound of waves breaking against rocks and the cries of old seagulls filled the air, Margot Whitmore clutched the tablet in her trembling hands. Her eyes that had witnessed the brutal winters along Cornwall's gray Atlantic shores, were now brimming with tears. On the screen, the image of her daughter, the little girl she once cradled with sand-covered arms, was being torn apart by cold laughter, daggered glances, and venomous words. On the other side of the screen, thousands of people, marine scientists, environmental activists, ordinary folk, watched through a leaked private live stream. They saw, they heard, they felt the numbing cruelty, and a tide of outrage began to rise. Comments exploded beneath the live feed, hashtag justice for Aria, hashtag note all that glitters is gold, hashtag humility over vanity, hashtag shame on Celestia guests. In a small cafe in Reykjavik, a group of ocean researchers, just returned from Icelandic expeditions, huddled around a screen, their hearts tightening painfully. A red-haired woman clutched her cup of hot cocoa and whispered, "That's Aria Whitmore, the one who saved the Skjaldarvik coral reefs last year." She turned down awards to protect the ocean. In a coastal slum in Manila, a boy, pumping clean water from a well, a project funded by Aria, looked up at the cracked old phone playing the live stream. He didn't understand all the flowery English words, but he understood the look in that girl's eyes, the kindness that once changed his life. Across universities, research institutes, and NGOs, those who had worked with Aria began to share her story. They didn't talk about her wealth or her dresses, but about the ocean maps she charted, the coral reefs she revived, the currents she helped heal. A powerful undertow was building, the current of truth. Amid the tide of furious comments, an anonymous user posted a single image, a photograph of Aria, clad in diving gear, cradling a vibrant sprig of red coral deep beneath the ocean surface. The caption was simple: "This is the real Aria Whitmore." Not the dress, not the shoes, the heart, and the world began to divide into two camps. On one side, the Versace gowns, the sapphire crowns, the diamond-studded watches. On the other, the swelling wave of kindness, integrity, and respect for a girl in a simple white linen dress. Back aboard the Celestia Monarch, Aria could feel it. Even though the crowd around her still laughed and jeered, the atmosphere had begun to shift. Like the sea before a storm, strange winds began to stir. The truth always finds a way to rise, even from beneath the deepest waves of lies. Isabella Moreau hadn't realized it yet. Omar Al-Saleh hadn't realized it yet. Serena Fontaine hadn't realized it yet. They were still basking in their false triumph, but somewhere, far offshore, a colossal wave had already formed, and no one could stop it. Margot Whitmore wiped her tears, whispering to the screen as if speaking directly to her daughter, "They think they are powerful because they have gold and jewels. But child, the tides bow only to those who listen to the sea." And out there, beyond the horizon, the waves crashed harder against the rocks. Something vast was coming. No fanfare, no warning, but utterly unstoppable. The deck of the Celestia Monarch bathed in golden sunset light, casting a shimmering glow over the high society crowd, their final glittering facade of arrogance. The music softened, the laughter, the clinking of glasses, the whispered slanders, all faded into a tense, expectant silence as the crystal loudspeaker mounted on the mast came alive. A deep, resonant male voice echoed across the deck. "Ladies and gentlemen, please make your way to the bow. The christening ceremony of the Celestia Monarch is about to commence." Italian leather shoes, Louboutin stilettos, Gucci loafers, all began moving toward the main stage. Aria walked with them, not hurried, not bowed. Her brown hair shimmered under the sunset, her white linen dress fluttering lightly in the sea breeze, standing out like a seagull soaring above a gilded ocean of humanity. On stage, a sharply dressed MC in a pristine Zegna suit held a microphone, exuding the polished confidence of someone hosting a perfectly scripted ceremony. He glanced down at his note card, and his voice rang out. "And now, ladies and gentlemen, please warmly welcome the official representative of the Celestia Monarch, honored to christen this vessel, Dr. Aria Whitmore." For a moment, the world froze. Laughter died mid-breath. Champagne flutes nearly slipped from stunned hands. Eyes that had only moments ago roamed over Aria with contempt now widened in disbelief. Isabella Moreau, her lips parted as if to say something, but nothing came out except pure panic. Omar Al-Saleh, The Richard Mille watch glittered nervously on his wrist as he looked desperately at his companions for answers. But none came. Serena Fontaine, her $1,000,000 couture dress, suddenly seemed to sag under its own weight, as if dragging her down to the floor. Arya stepped onto the stage. Step by step, steady, quiet, unwavering, no security entourage, no grand announcement, just her and her truth. A trembling staff member handed her a gold-ribboned champagne bottle, the one designated for the christening smash. Arya accepted it. Her hands were steady as bedrock beneath the pounding surf. They laughed at me, she thought. Now they are forced to bow to the truth. Arya turned to face the bow of the Celestia monarch, the crown jewel of Roe Maritime Holdings, the pride of the elite. She drew a deep breath, lifted the champagne bottle high, and, in one swift, decisive movement, shattered it against the ship's bow. The crack echoed across the marina. Foamy white champagne gushed down the deck, flowing like a tiny, cresting wave. Arya's voice rang out, not loud, but resonant and clear. I, Arya Whitmore, hereby christen the Celestia monarch. May she always sail under the guardianship of integrity and true pride. Silence. No applause. No cheers. Because in that one moment, everything had been upended. Out across the world, social media exploded like a tidal wave. Hashtag Arya Whitmore rocketed to the top of global trending. True legacy. Hashtag Celestia crowned. Margot Whitmore, watching from the other side of the live stream, burst into tears. She pressed her hand against the screen, whispering through a broken voice, "My daughter, you did it." On stage, Arya turned, her gaze sweeping across the crowd. Those who had mocked her now stared at the floor, desperate to avoid her eyes. Eyes that needed no threats, no words, to make even the proudest tremble. This, Arya thought, is not a victory bought by gold. It is a victory forged by resilience, and the world, whether it liked it or not, had no choice but to bow to a girl wearing nothing but a simple white linen dress, carrying within her an ocean that would never yield. The deck of the Celestia monarch was frozen in stunned silence. The soft whisper of the Ligurian sea seemed to hold its breath, awaiting something inevitable. Overhead, the chopping sound of helicopter blades sliced through the horizon. A sleek black helicopter descended onto the auxiliary landing pad beside the marina. No roaring escort, no dazzling entourage. Only one man, Maxwell Whitmore, chairman of Whitmore Maritime Holdings. He stepped down from the helicopter, a simple navy blue suit and leather shoes scuffed by thousands of docks around the world. His silver hair gleamed under the sinking sun. His face, weathered by ocean storms and countless seasons at sea, was carved from steel. Maxwell stepped onto the deck. Each of his steps against the teakwood rang out like a gavel delivering judgment. The crowd parted instinctively, recoiling as if before a tidal force. The faces of those who had laughed at Arya, Isabella Moreau, Omar Al-Saleh, Serena Fontaine, now twisted with dread. Maxwell stopped beside Arya. He said nothing at first. He simply looked out across the crowd, those once proud faces now pale and stiff as stone. No one dared meet his gaze. Then Maxwell spoke. He needed no microphone. His voice rolled deep, steady, heavy as a tsunami rumbling from the ocean's depths. I am Maxwell Whitmore, founder of Whitmore Maritime Holdings. From a single fishing boat, I built this empire, not with tricks, not with silks and diamonds, but with loyalty, integrity, and a love for the sea. He paused. The wind surged, snapping the naval flags overhead. Maxwell's eyes, sharp as tempered steel, swept the crowd once more. Today, I invited all of you here, but I concealed Arya's identity, not to deceive you, but to see if you still remembered how to see a person with your heart, not just your eyes. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some bowed their heads, some blanched, as if stripped bare in public. Maxwell pulled out a document, a transfer deed printed on heavy golden parchment. I stand here today to declare Arya Whitmore, the one you mocked, is from this moment forth the sole owner of Whitmore Maritime Holdings. She inherits the Celestia monarch, the entire island of Isola Ventura, and our entire global maritime network. A silent explosion rippled across the deck. Those who had mocked her were paralyzed. Isabella Moreau nearly dropped her champagne glass. Omar Al-Saleh gripped his chair so hard, his knuckles turned white. Serena Fontaine staggered, clutching the marble railing for support. But Maxwell wasn't finished. His voice dropped lower, more dangerous, the low rumble of a storm gathering at sea, and as with any ship that sails, loyalty must be tested. I have ordered a full legal review of every contract and relationship tied to Whitmore Holdings, and I hereby declare all agreements, contracts, and affiliations with anyone who insulted Aria today are hereby terminated, effective immediately. It was a thunderclap. Multi-billion-dollar projects, luxury shipping contracts, royal partnerships were wiped out with a single decree. The live stream exploded. Comments flared like wildfire, hashtag Aria rules, hashtag justice served, hashtag fall of the fake. Maxwell turned to Aria. He placed a steady, calloused hand on her shoulder, a hand that had weathered the worst storms. You walked through the tempest on your own, Aria, without gold, without guns, only with the truth. Aria looked up. Her eyes glowed under the sunset, like an ocean cradling the sun itself. Maxwell turned back to the crowd for the final time. From now on, if you wish to step aboard the ships of Whitmore Holdings, make sure you know how to respect real worth. And he stepped down from the stage. No music, no applause, only the overwhelming silence, the humbled silence of those who once believed power was stitched into gold-threaded collars, blind to the truth that real power lived in hearts that never bowed. After Maxwell Whitmore's declaration, the deck of the Celestia Monarch sank into a heavy, suffocating silence. The sparkling champagne glasses were forgotten. Eyes that once gleamed with arrogance now stared blankly at the polished teak floor, avoiding the searing weight of the truth. And then, the flood of justice began. A team of legal representatives, clad in dark gray suits and crisp white shirts, slowly emerged from the far side of the deck. In their hands were thick folders, heavy as death sentences. Isabella Moreau, heiress of the Moreau financial empire, and one of Aria's most vicious mockers, was the first to be summoned. A legal officer handed her a thick document. Notice, all commercial credit, investment contracts, and partnerships between Whitmore Holdings and the Moreau Financial Group are hereby unconditionally terminated. Isabella's face turned ghostly pale. The champagne glass slipped from her fingers, shattering into shards that glittered like broken pride. A sharp crack echoed, the sound of crystal splintering, like the sound of a haughty heart fracturing beneath its own weight. Omar Al-Saleh, oil prince, opened his mouth to protest, but before he could utter a word, another legal officer approached. Mr. Dow Al-Saleh, all maritime shipping contracts and logistics alliances with Whitmore Maritime Holdings are terminated, effective. 10 minutes ago, Omar's face drained of color. His fingers clenched tightly around his phone, a heavy gold ring slipping from his knuckles. He knew, without maritime transport, even an oil empire could sink faster than the Titanic. Serena Fontaine, the fashion queen who had mocked Aria's linen dress, received her envelope with trembling hands. Notice, Whitmore Holdings will withdraw all investments from Fontaine Group fashion brands. Additionally, all exclusive orders for this year's cruise collection are hereby canceled. Serena's hand slackened. Her crocodile clutch dropped limply to the deck, a soft, hollow sound, like pride crumbling into dust. Around the world, a live stream blazed with fury and awe. Viewers witnessed a domino collapse happening in real time. CEOs frantically making calls, trying to salvage contracts. Socialites scrambling to wipe all traces of the yacht party from their social media. Journalists whispering urgently to their editors. Historic purge at the Celestia Monarch. Somewhere behind the crowd, a sob cracked the heavy air. A young heiress, once clinging to Isabella's shadow, collapsed into a lounge chair, burying her face in her hands. The sapphire tiara pinned in her hair slipped off, rolling across the deck, the perfect symbol of what they had just lost. Margot Whitmore, watching through her live stream, nodded quietly. Not in triumph, not in hatred, but in the solemn knowledge that those who sow the winds must eventually reap the storm. Maxwell Whitmore stood firm, a towering figure, like a supreme judge of the seas. He didn't shout. He didn't need to. His stern, merciless silence was enough to shatter every crown, every hollow title. Arya remained beside her father. She didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She simply stood, calm as the sea after a storm, needing no praise, no fanfare. True justice, she thought, doesn't come with fanfare. It comes with the quiet resilience of a wave that never yields. A strong gust swept across the deck. The naval flags snapped sharply overhead. And at that moment, amid the silent wreckage of power, Arya Whitmore stood tall, her white linen dress billowing like a proud sail, untouchable and undefeated. The Celestia Monarch, once a monument to opulence, now resembled a ghost ship, adrift in a storm of silent reckoning. The embroidered silks, the glittering crystal shoes, the gold-threaded suits, none of it mattered any more under the cold, hard gaze of justice. Out at sea, the news of the ceremony spread at lightning speed. Major outlets, CNN, BBC, Le Monde, Nikkei, all headlined simultaneously. Tycoon heir's fall at historic yacht christening. Arya Whitmore, from linen girl to maritime queen. A lesson for the global elite: never underestimate human dignity. The hashtag Arya Whitmore dominated the #1 trending spot worldwide, accompanied by hashtag Ocean Queen, hashtag Fall of the Fake, hashtag Justice on Deck. In a boardroom in Paris, the Moreau Bank convened an emergency meeting. Isabella Moreau sat pale and stricken as the reports flooded in. Mass investor withdrawals, canceled partnerships. Stock prices plummeted into freefall. A grim-faced CFO tapped a heavy file against the table and muttered coldly, "A linen dress. Just wiped $3 billion off our market value in a single afternoon." In Riyadh, Al Saleh Logistics faced international asset freezes. Omar Al Sail, who once sneered at Arya, now stood at the edge of total ruin. In Paris, Fontaine Fashion House found itself besieged by environmental activists. Protest banners unfurled. "No to blood-stained fashion. We stand with Arya Whitmore." Serena Fontaine was forced to resign from the board in utter disgrace. The crowns that once glittered under crystal chandeliers now fell into the mud. One by one, no one looked up to them as royalty anymore. They were remembered instead as those who buried themselves under the weight of their own arrogance. On the deck of the Celestia Monarch, Arya stood there, no crown upon her head, no glittering cloak across her shoulders, no one kneeling at her feet, only silence. The peace of a sea that had outlasted the storm. The world once thought power meant grandeur, Arya reflected, but true power is the silent heart that never wavers. The guests who once mocked her now slipped quietly from the deck. One by one, heads bowed, shoes scuffing the teak floor, no trace of their former pride. Arya's white linen dress fluttered gently in the sea breeze, like the sail of a ship setting forth into a new era. Whispers began to ripple through the marina. "Who is she? How could we have been so blind?" I laughed at her. And now I wish I never had. In a corner of the deck, a 12-year-old girl, the daughter of a banking CEO, tugged on her mother's hand and whispered, "Mama, when I grow up, I want to be like her." The mother choked up, hugging her child tightly, feeling a deep, aching regret she had never known before. And so, without any grand declarations, without shouting or demanding tribute, Arya Whitmore quietly buried an entire era of arrogance. Simply by standing firm with her quiet dignity, the sky over Ligorian darkened to deep indigo. The last shards of sunset shattered across the waves. The deck of the Celestia Monarch fell eerily still. No more raucous laughter, no more clinking of crystal glasses. Only the soft whisper of the sea and the gentle, resolute footsteps of Arya Whitmore. She walked through the empty expanse, through downcast eyes, past million-dollar dresses retreat like faded ghosts. No one blocked her path. No one dared speak a word. No need to fight back. Arya thought with each firm step, for the sea has already spoken for me. At the far end of the deck, hidden among the shadows, the once secret live streamers, those who had gleefully captured her humiliation, now silently filmed her with awe, fear, and reverence. Comments on the global live stream surged like a tidal wave. She doesn't need power, she is power. Walking tall among those who scorned you, that is true victory. Arya Whitmore, the uncrowned queen. At the marina's edge, a small tender bobbed quietly in the water, waiting. No motorcade, no bodyguards, only the open sea. Maxwell Whitmore stood beside the waiting boat, saying nothing. Only his gaze, the gaze of a father bursting with silent, boundless pride. Arya brushed her fingers over the rough sea rope necklace around her throat, the talisman her mother had given her, which had steadied her through the fiercest tides. She turned back to glance once, not in search of approval, not to reclaim dignity, but simply to remember. Remember that while people could steal away jewels, titles, and even applause, they could never take the steadfastness of a true heart. And when the storms pass, Arya thought, only those strong enough to keep walking will remain. She stepped down into the waiting boat. The tender rocked gently, floating atop the deep, endless blue. Maxwell followed, silent as a loyal old sail bending to the right wind. The small boat rumbled to life, pulling away from the Celestia monarch. No fanfare, no fireworks, only the hush of waves, the quietest, most reverent applause imaginable. On the marina, those who once laughed at Arya could only watch. They watched her silhouette shrink into the vastness, disappearing into the indigo sea. Some, without thinking, tore off their heavy jewelry. Some bowed their heads, hiding from the unseen cameras. They thought they were emperors of this world. Arya smiled faintly, but in truth, they were only castaways. Out across the digital ocean, social media kept roaring. Hashtag Arya the uncrowned queen, hashtag silent victory, hashtag she walks alone. But the world bows. The final image captured on the global livestream that night was not one of glittering diamonds, not of champagne toasts. It was this: a girl in a white linen dress, a simple sea rope tied around her sunlit hair, and a small boat cutting across the darkening ocean, captioned simply, "The sea bows to Arya Whitmore." Comment after comment burned brightly around the world. True power doesn't need gold, it shines from within. Arya Whitmore, the girl who made the entire ocean lift its head. Let's teach our children to be like her, not like those who laughed at her. Far away, at a quiet coastal inlet where Margot Whitmore sat watching, the sound of waves striking the shore seemed louder, more triumphant. She pressed her hand to the seashell pendant at her throat, closed her eyes, and let the tears fall freely. "My daughter, you didn't just save yourself," Margot whispered. "You restored the world's faith in kindness." The small boat continued its journey. A pod of dolphins suddenly surfaced, swimming alongside, escorting Arya through the waters like old friends. The last rays of the sun paved a golden path across the waves, and Arya, the girl once mocked for her linen dress, her battered shoes, her humble rope-tied hair, now sailed forward into eternity, etching her name across the ocean, needing no one's permission. "We weren't born to bow before glitter," Arya thought as the salt wind kissed her face, "but to walk forward no matter how fierce the storm." And so, the great ocean, vast and ancient, bowed in silent reverence to Arya Whitmore, not with fanfare, not with applause, but with peace, the deepest tribute it could offer to one who truly deserved it. It is not crowns that make queens, nor gold that defines strength. Only steadfastness, kindness, and truth can make the world bow down. From the deck of the Celestia monarch, those who once ridiculed Arya could only stand in silence. They watched her disappear into the deepening twilight, the small tender slicing through the indigo waters, carrying her farther and farther away. Some instinctively removed their heavy jewelry, some bowed their heads, covering their faces from the relentless unseen cameras. They once thought themselves emperors of the world. Arya's smile lingered faintly in memory, but in truth, they were nothing but homeless castaways adrift on life's ocean. Out there, the digital ocean roared, Hashtag Arya the uncrowned queen, hashtag silent victory, hashtag she walks alone. But the world bows across every platform, across every continent. The image of Arya, simple, steadfast, surged like a tsunami. No glittering gowns, no diamond tiaras, only a white linen dress, a piece of sea rope tied in her hair, and a lone girl walking away into the endless sea. The single most shared photo that night wasn't the golden-drenched champagne toasts or the silk-clad elites. It was Arya, stepping into eternity, quiet and unbroken. The caption read, "The sea bows to Arya Whitmore." Comments flooded in from every corner of the earth. True strength needs no gold. It shines from within. Arya Whitmore, the girl who made the entire ocean rise to meet her. Let us raise our children to be like her, not like those who laughed at her. In a small bay where Margot Whitmore sat, the surf crashed louder against the rocks. She gently pressed the seashell pendant at her throat, closed her eyes, and let her tears fall freely. "My daughter," Margot whispered, "you didn't just save yourself, you saved the world's belief in kindness." Meanwhile, the world continued to fracture along an invisible line. The aristocracy of silk and diamonds had cracked open, revealing rot beneath the gold leaf. In Paris, the Moreau financial empire reeled. Isabella Moreau, once untouchable, sat hollow-eyed in the headquarters conference room, staring as the news poured in. Major investors pulling out, luxury clients abandoning ship. Their stock value plunged into a free-fall nosedive. At the head of the table, a cold-faced financial director tapped his pen once against the gleaming wood and announced, "A linen dress." He said grimly, "A single white linen dress has cost us $3 billion in one afternoon." In Riyadh, the Al Saleh family logistics empire crumbled. Without Whitmore Maritime Holdings shipping network, their oil empire faced massive disruptions, frozen assets, contracts torn apart, royalties strained to break. Omar Al Saleh, who once lounged and laughed on the yacht deck, now sat pale and frantic, making desperate calls no one answered. In Paris, the Fontaine fashion house, once a fortress of prestige, found itself besieged. Outside its flagship store, environmental activists rallied with banners, "We DONT need blood-stained fashion. Arya Whitmore is our queen." Under global pressure, Serena Fontaine resigned from her board positions in shame. The crowns, tiaras, and designer shoes that once dazzled the world now sank into the mud of public contempt, no longer admired, no longer envied, remembered only as those who mocked dignity and paid the price. Meanwhile, at ports around the world, Whitmore Holdings ships sailed proudly under new banners, bearing not the names of the rich and famous, but of coastlines restored, coral reefs healed, and tides revered. The world had begun to remember what true legacy meant. On the deck of the Celestia Monarch, Arya's silhouette faded into the horizon. The once proud guests could only watch as she vanished into the twilight. The last white flash of her linen dress swallowed by the indigo sea, they stood in stunned silence. No more champagne toasts, no more boasting. Only the dull, heavy sound of their own regret. Some quietly removed their crowns. Some turned away from the cameras, trying to hide their faces, but it was too late. Across the world, millions continued watching the live stream. The final shared image of the night was not a glitzy celebration, not a sparkling glass raised high. It was a simple image, a girl in a white linen dress, a rough sea rope tying back her hair, and a small boat cutting a golden path across the endless sea. No diamonds, no trumpets, only the ocean, vast and reverent, embraced her. The caption read, "The sea bows to Arya Whitmore." The comments poured in. True strength doesn't need crowns or thrones, it carries itself. Arya Whitmore, the girl who turned an ocean into a red carpet. May we all raise daughters like her, fearless, humble, and unbreakable. Somewhere, beyond the marina, hidden from the glaring lights, Margot Whitmore closed her eyes and let the salty breeze dry her tears. "You didn't just win tonight, my daughter," she thought. You changed the very tides of this world. Meanwhile, the small tender carried Arya farther and farther from the flashing cameras, the glittering chandeliers, the cold world of titles and taunts. She sat quietly at the bow, her face tilted to the wind. No heavy jewels weighed down her wrists. No crown crushed her hair. Only the light scent of salt and freedom wrapped around her, and for the first time in a long while, the ocean itself seemed to sigh, a deep, ancient sound, as if the world had finally understood. From the deck of the Celestia Monarch, no one dared speak her name aloud anymore. Only soft murmurs trailed behind. She accomplished what none of us, with all our gold and grandeur, ever could. She walks like a star across a dark ocean. We laughed at a queen, because she wore no crown. Out across the digital world, the tidal wave kept rising, not celebrating wealth, not bowing to status, but honoring quiet courage, steadfast dignity, unbreakable truth. That night, one image seared itself into global memory. A girl, simple, strong, unstoppable, sailing into the unknown. She wore no jewels, no silk banners trailed behind her. Only the sea itself laid down a path before her, shimmering in the last light of day, and millions whispered her name into the night. Arya Whitmore. The waves rolled endlessly under her small boat, like 1,000 silent applause, not from courts, not from empires, but from the soul of the world itself. We are not born to bow before glitter, Arya thought, her hair whipping in the wind, but to walk straight ahead, no matter how fierce the storms around us. And so the ocean, vast, ancient, and mighty, bowed silently before Arya Whitmore, not with fireworks, not with music, but with pure, eternal peace, the highest honor it could ever bestow. It is not a crown that makes a queen. It is not gold that defines strength. It is the quiet, unyielding heart, steadfast, kind, and true, that makes even the whole world bow down